It's a great group of people. I mean, I feel enormous affection for this group of people who I've spent such time with. I feel very fond of them. The planetary numbers don't vary too much, so I was able to take pretty reasonable averages or medians there.
Chris Impey, a university distinguished professor in the astronomy department at the University of Arizona, specializes in the origins and the evolution of the universe. Maybe it was karma, but a little over 2 years ago, he was asked to participate in a program called Science for Monks.
Well, I got a call out of the blue in November, I think, from a young guy I'd never met before. He was a physics and environmental science postdoc at Berkeley. And he said, how'd you like to go to northern India and teach Buddhist monks cosmology? That's a kind of request you don't get every day. The program's existence is a sign of the sort of visionary nature of the Dalai Lama, because he's decided that the monastic tradition of his monks does not include a lot of science and math, but he knows that that's sort of how the world runs now. So he thinks that his well-educated monks of the 21st century should know math and science. That's my son, and that's the organizer, Bryce.
The small program, founded by Bryce Johnson and funded by the Sager Foundation, invites lecturers from the West to come to northern India to give an intensive 3-week workshop. In Professor Impey's case, to train about 30 monks in science. The Tibetan government is in exile in this Indian town at the foothills of the Himalayas called Dharamsala.
I didn't have a background in Buddhism. I'm an agnostic, but I'm interested in a number of traditions. I've taught with the Jesuit astronomers that I work with and taught at their summer schools, so I have a sort of connection with the Jesuits as well. But I was very interested in the culture and in the longevity of the religious tradition, and also some of the things that it stands for. So I was drawn to that.
After agreeing to go there, Professor Impey's next challenge, how to prepare for his students.
I've taught everything from elementary school kids to retired engineers, you know. And he said it's interesting. He said you won't really know what to expect, because at some level, technically, they're quite naive and untutored. Their highest math may be like 5th grade math. But their tradition and their inclination for study is incredibly strong. Their work ethic, their concentration, their application. He said they can handle whatever you throw at them. But even that didn't prepare me for how extraordinary they are as students, just because they're so engaged. And of course, there's that special element that you can't really compare to any other audience, which is their lightness. You know, they're in the classroom, there's just a lot of laughing going on. There's a lot of smiling. We have a lot of fun. It's probably the most fun of any teaching situation I ever encounter.
However, Buddhism is a cerebral discipline, and monks spend years studying the inner world of the mind. So how do they assimilate concepts relating to the physical world?
And His Holiness also makes a very clear point, which is maybe a distinguishing feature of the tradition, that it's meditative, of course, but it's also investigative. He says you should be guided by the natural world. You should be guided by exploring nature and understanding how the world works, and that's a scientific perspective.
Of all the classes he's taught over the years, the students in this one surprised him every day.
Partly it's because their approach, of course, is so fresh. It's information that's new to them. Their way of thinking about it is new. And so, for example, I might be talking about how we know the age of the universe, and we measure the age of various things from the Earth up to the universe as a whole, and then one of them will just put up his hand and ask, but what is this thing called time that you're measuring? How do you measure time? You know, so they just jump right out of the box of what you're talking about and hit some great and fundamental question, and then of course we'll spend the whole rest of the class on that.
And Professor Impey says the monks could argue a point in the nicest way possible.
Debate is a very strong part of their tradition, part of their training, and so they know how to debate. And it's very intense, the debate. It's extremely good-natured, but extremely intense. And so you just unleash them on this activity and then just step away, and it'll go on as long as you let it. I mean, and that's the kind of activity that works really well. There's me being Einstein. So I answered questions for like half an hour on gravity. And then they wanted them asked, and I didn't think I'd get it back.
The goal is to train the monks as teachers so that they can return to their monasteries to spread the word about science.
You can do the math. With 30 monks in a program taking 3 years to train and 20,000 monks total, you're never going to get there. The Dalai Lama had this pointed out to him, and he just did his little giggle and said, well, if it takes 1,000 years, no problem.
This will be the third summer Professor Impey has taught the monks in India. What's had the biggest impact is seeing how two very different disciplines can be in harmony.
As you know, in our culture, there are plenty of areas where science and religion seem to come into conflict, in some cases unnecessarily so, to my view. This complete concordance of a very ancient and powerful religious tradition with the very most modern science you can have, and the complete naturalness of that fit, that should tell people something. That should tell them that there's nothing innately in conflict between a spiritual tradition and a sort of logical tradition, if you like, an analytic tradition. Like, these ideas completely and comfortably coexist in the monks that I teach.